Good afternoon and welcome to our second day of the Change the Image campaign. If you haven't had a chance to join us yesterday, you can catch all the videos on YouTube, same with all the videos that are coming out throughout the week. They'll all be on our channel so you can watch it afterwards if you can't join us live. Today we have a very special guest who is coming to us all the way over in Canada. Good afternoon, Yannis, how are you?
Hi, Tasha. Thank you so much for having me. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for asking. How are things over in Canada for you at the moment?
Pretty well. The summer is back, so everybody's happier. It's a good time. It's a good time to get back into creating too. So I'm really excited about that.
Fantastic. So today we're going to chat about your work, your photographic
Yeah.
work, basically. I'll bring up some slideshows of your work in a little bit, but I guess to start with, a little bit about kind of the equipment you're using, if that's all right.
Yes, of course. So I shoot primarily with a Canon. Which one is it? Sorry, I haven't used my camera since, full disclosure, I haven't used my camera since like January because I've been so busy. But yeah, so I shoot with the Canon 6D and a 24-70 millimeter lens. So that's like my main like camera. That's like the kind of like my go-to, like the thing I that like the gear I use for like most of the shoots I do, because I shoot primarily portraiture and like editorial, so like so people in general. And so I think that lens in that camera, it's like a pretty good one that does the job fairly well. I think, yeah.
I was going to say, you obviously mentioned very lightly mentioned kind of the work you're doing. I wonder if you could like delve a little bit more into the kind of photography that you're actually doing and sort of describe as however you like the work you kind of
Yeah.
create.
Yes, so um I am primarily a portraiture photographer. So I take portraits that are mostly focused on exploring the identity and diversity of cultures on the African continent and its diaspora. So I use my photography kind of to show some aspects of different cultures throughout the African continent that might not necessarily be known by a lot of people, or by by like the general cultural like subconscious. So like these photos, for instance, um, are about African mythology and primarily South Sudanese mythology. And so I'm really interested in uh, talking about things and like telling stories that are not, like I said, not necessarily like as accessible to like most people who are not as exposed to African cultures and or to African people as I am, for instance. So yeah, so I try to use these stories, these experiences from people I meet, and like from my research into my work, and through portraiture and through storytelling to kind of create these images and construct this universe, basically.
Nice. It's because I was going to say as well, kind of you're kind of showcasing that culture and identity for your work. I mean, I've got your work hopefully showing
Yeah.
to so people can see it at the moment, so they can kind of see the work you're producing, which fantastic images. Kind of love the
Thank
editorial
you.
mix as well that you bring into your work. I guess does that have quite a big influence on kind of the style you approach, or is it just kind of it was what it happened to kind of take the form
What
it's taken and kind of
editorial?
hmm,
Yeah, it does actually. A lot of my early influences were, or photographic influences were fashion photographers from like fashion magazines, and even a lot of the work of early um photographers, like African photographers that I was looking at, like Malik Sidibe, for instance. A lot of them were like kind of geared, had like a sort of editorial lens in a way, and sort of like because he was really putting clothes and like the presentation of like his models forward, right? Like, so the way they were dressing, the way they were expressing themselves were like central to the images. And so I try to bring that into the work I do also.
I guess, what was it that you kind of first became interested in with the types of kind of projects you started creating? So obviously, looking at your website, you've got some really interesting projects. I mean, what was it kind of like you're trying to kind of create around it, I guess, is the question there.
I'd say it started when I started to focus precisely or more specifically with photography in exploring like African culture. I'd say when I moved to Canada. And so because before then I had been living back home in Gabon pretty much my whole life up until I graduated high school. So after when I realized, so when I got to Canada and then I was meeting all these people from all over the world, I realized that there was well, first of all, most people didn't know where I was from. Like, well, the majority of people did not even know that there was a country called Gabon that existed. I mean, which is fine, we're very small. But yeah, but I also realized that there was a certain image and a certain perception of even Africa or Africans as a whole. And I was interested in kind of presenting the counter narrative to that, I'd say. And so so I remember the first time after my first year in university, when I went back to Gabon, I remember thinking, and I remember my photography being more geared towards like showing like the culture and showing the people, and as opposed to previously. Yeah, so I'd say it's basically when I moved outside of home that I started to become interested in like the ways in which we were seen and we were understood in the world. Yeah. And how photography could like impact and influence and change that.
So kind of photography became your tool essentially for showcasing a different narrative.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Were you a photographer kind of beforehand, before you kind of moved over to Canada?
Yeah, but it wasn't like, it was just a hobby that, I was doing as, just for fun. I didn't really have like any sort of direction. I was just photography. Like I was just taking, photos of like whatever I could. And then, yeah, it's then that with time that it progressively started to like narrow itself down to portraiture geared towards exploring identity and culture and all of that.
This is a bit of a purple one, but what was it about photography that you felt was the best medium for you over kind of like filmmaking and things like that? Was there something that photography really drew you into for kind of building your narratives?
I think it was just my own relationship with it, because I'd already, like, it was something I was already like doing. And then also I've always been interested in the still image. Like I always even like outside of photography, like I really enjoy like comic books and like all of that, like just images in general. So I thought, I'm a terrible drawer. I don't know how to draw. So I thought, yeah, photography. When I started to do photography, actually, I was introduced from a friend from high school. And I remember being like, or thinking about how good it felt to just like be able to like express myself, I guess, that way. And yeah, so I guess it just like it's something I started and then I guess I just never stopped doing.
Like a natural progression for you.
Yeah.
That's quite a nice relationship with photography, I think. Naturally
Yeah.
progressing into using it as a
Yeah, I
tool.
didn't even have a camera at first. Like I was borrowing my friends. And then I remember I started with my mother had, like the reflex, I think there
Yeah.
is that even reflex? Like the very small, like the tourist, like the kind like that tourists kind of walk around with.
I know the one you
And so
mean.
I was shooting with that. And then between these big ones and the smaller ones, there's like an intermediate that I had for a minute, and then I got like an actual so it really has been like a natural progression. Actually, my very first relationship with images was when I was taking photos with my phone, I remember, but it was literally just not, it was just photos of friends, and it was like no, like there was no artistic thought into it. I was just photographing my friends. But I remember liking it, and then I was introduced to like actually taking photography with a camera, and that's when it went from there.
And you just kind of grew into the work you're obviously producing at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I've got the images coming up. We can see the kind of what you're producing with the Canon, which is, yeah, stunning images. Absolutely beautiful. I mean, obviously,
Thank you.
narrative and what you're doing now is kind of obviously so important to your work. And do you feel it's important to have that focus for your work?
For me personally, it is. I'm really into cohesiveness in one's body of work, and even like when like with like a lot of the artists that inspire me, the thing that inspired me the most is artists who are able to limit themselves in terms of like the kind of things they explore, or like the kind of ways in which they go about their artistic process, but still be able to like have a lot of range within this limitation. I think that's a challenge I enjoy having, and it helps also not only with consistency, but like to have like a more cohesive body of work and to be understood better as an artist, like to just have this focus, like is to just focus on what matters, I guess, um, is what is important to me, like as an artist, to like, yeah.
What, so when it comes kind of down to creating your bodies of work, obviously you do break it down into kind of different, portfolio is probably not the right word at all. It's kind of, it is different narratives and stories that you break your work down
Yeah,
into.
I see it as different stories in like kind of the same universe.
Mm.
So yeah, so like when you look at like, it's a stupid example, but when you look at like superheroes, let's say Marvel, right? They live in like this world, but they have all these different people who all do like their own things, but it's still like within the same world. And when you look at it from like a general perspective, it's still kind of like there's still the cohesion and like a it still makes sense together, right? And so that's how I try to look at my body of work. I try to have them, I mean, even though from one story to the next they might be different stylistically, I try to still have a similar visual language that is similar enough to be like, so that it's part of like a cohesive body of work, so that when you look at all of my photos um, together, it still kind of makes sense, and there's still kind of not the same story, but like it's, you still understand that it's part of kind of the same universe.
So when you're kind of creating the new story in your Marvel universe of your photographic images, as we'll put it now, where do you
Yeah.
tend to find the inspiration? Do you just kind of, do you have an idea and then you build from there, or yeah, how do you kind of go about
Uh,
creating
it
your bodies of work?
it depends. I think sometimes it's from an idea I have, or something specific I wanna explore, or sometimes it's just from something I see or something I read about. interest me, or sometimes it's just like a story, or uh, like a story about like an event or a public figure, or like a cultural tradition or something of that nature that inspires me, that inspires me to create a story out of it. So I guess it depends, but usually it's from inspiration comes from things I find and I stumble upon when like I do research for like, whether it's for school because I'm in grad school, or for just like in general.
Do you find that you kind of keep a scrapbook almost like of ideas that
Yeah,
come
like
to
when
you?
I find something interesting, I just save it and then to be like explored later or something. Yeah.
Because you mentioned obviously you're in grad school at the moment. I think you've been working pretty hard on your academics from what it sounds like. I mean, are you allowed to tell us a little bit like about kind of the project you're working on for that at the moment, or is it quite?
In grad school, I'm in international and intercultural communications, but my thesis is about photography as well, and like kind of the social function of images and the ways in which images help us construct the way we see the world, and also the way we interact with people in the world. So like others that, are from like different cultures, etc. So all of it is kind of related in some way, photography and everything.
Just with your work, what is it you're kind of, I guess, hoping that other people will take away from your images?
Um, I'd say I would hope that my images contribute to like um I have the word in my mind in French, but I can't think of the word in English. Like the I hope that my images contribute to like, I guess, adding an additional layer in people's mind, or adding more, I guess, complexity and nuance to the way people think about and understand Africans and Africa, and like whether it's Africa on the continent, but also like Africans across the world. Yeah, I hope, and also from to the Africans like me who are looking at these photos, I hope uh, in that same way it makes them, you know, feel proud and like feel good about like um, their existence and their identity in the world.
Just like proud of the culture as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think what would be really cool. Do you mind? Are you happy to talk us through kind of the setup for your kind of images? Because obviously you've got such a heavy editorial kind of look at kind of your style choices, and I know you use makeup artists and things like that. So would you be happy to talk us through kind of beginning to end of like sort of process of setting up one of your images?
Yeah, so whenever I have an idea, I just contact, I guess, the people that I think would work best to do it. So like whether it's like a makeup artist or a model or something of that nature, and then we figure out the best way to go about things. So like there's also like, because it's a collaboration, right? So there's a conversation in terms of like, so there's my initial idea, but also through conversation the idea can change and the idea can turn into something bigger or something like that. So after the conversation we just build from it. It's usually me and either like a stylist or makeup artist, and then we think about like which model would work best, or which and then we go from there basically.
Okay.
And then we just take the photos and then I edit them.
So you're doing the full process yourself as well, so you're editing as well.
Yeah. And sometimes there has been times when the people I collaborate with come to me with the idea, and then again the conversation makes it turn into something else, and then yeah. But usually for most of all of my work, my personal work, I shoot and retouch and edit all of it. Yeah.
Full creative control.
Yeah, because actually editing is one of my favorite parts of the process, I think, because it's the time where I guess it's the only time where like you can really sit with your work and look at it, I think, because when you're taking photos you don't really have time to like sit with the image and like look at like the image and like critique it. And so I think when you're editing, for me anyways, it's when I'm able to see kind of what worked and what could have worked better and what didn't work. And so yeah, I think it's a good time for introspection and growth, which is why I enjoy it.
Have you ever found that kind of following that reflective period, you've actually go back and do shoots again as well? Or kind of you just kind of
I have actually, or added or made like a part 2 of the shoot or something. Yeah, I've done it. Where it's like where you look at the image or the images that you've created, and there have been times where you're like, it's not enough. Like you need to do something else, or you need to. Yeah, it's happened a couple times for sure.
Do you have a particular project that you favorite upon any other ones at all?
I don't I don't think so. I really do like The Darkest Color. I don't know if it's included in the selection though, but I have a series called The Darkest Color in which I explore kind of the cultural significance of the color black and its association with death, and kind of how, so it's basically a, a story about how death is seen as like this tragedy and like this like terrible thing in like a culture, when in reality it's like inevitable for everybody. So like it's and yeah, it's I liked because I enjoyed the process of doing it, because so if you see the image, it's completely black, and it's uh it's completely black, and it's completely like the models are like recovered in paint, etc. So like the process was nice, and I also enjoyed I mean, I guess the reception, like a lot of people responded well to the story. And so yeah, I'd say it's my favorite. But I honestly I love a lot of the stories I've created. Recently, I really like The First Woman too, which is the one we're seeing on the right. And it's something I took last year. And yeah, it was just a really good day. Um, and we had a really great time taking these photos. So I always have really fun memories of that.
I've just brought up the image of the lady. Is it she lying in
Yeah.
bricks as well? What a fantastic image to set up. I mean, did you find a location, or did you kind of bring in?
No, one of the model, not her, but the other model in the story actually knew about the location, and so he's the one who told me about it, and we went there, and yeah, it's this big abandoned, like, I don't know what it was actually.
Amazing
But it
location.
was like very impressive, yeah.
It's rather fantastic, isn't it? I mean, that's one of those scouting opportunities where you kind of make a note.
Yeah.
Like, I'm definitely coming back here.
Yeah, for sure.
No, it's really cool. I guess what's next for you as a photographer?
More stories, I guess. I'm really, yeah, I guess um I'm really into exploring mythology currently, and like kind of the social dysfunction of mythology in pre-colonial Africa, and so kind of how it was used to like serve as like a way to teach about morals and values and things of that nature in like the different communities. So I think a lot of my upcoming stories are going to revolve around that probably. So like a lot of exploration about mythology, spirituality, religion, because I think it's one of these things in even for us Africans that we have been conditioned to kind of ignore a little bit. And but it's such an important part of culture. It's such an important part of identity that I think some of these stories deserve to kind of be at least recorded, or at least to have some sort of, because obviously my photography is not the actual recording of the event, but at least to have some sort of interpretation of this story to teach it through photography, through the images, if that makes sense.
So I guess on a slightly more personal level for you, what would you say is the kind of the most important aspect of changing the narrative and showcasing African identities for you?
For me, the most important part of the change of narrative is everything that change of narrative brings, right? Like the change of narrative, changing the narrative means changing the way people think of the African continent and Africans, right? And that means changing the way people treat them. And so that means less discrimination, that means less racism, that means less, and even on an institutional level, that means less barriers preventing Africans globally from having access to whatever they might want to have access to, but still can't. And yeah, so I think for changing the narrative through images is a contribution to kind of this change in the way Africa is constructed in most people's minds.
And we've got a question from the audience, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, sure.
So Gary Davies said, "Those colours are so vivid." Yes, colours are very vivid. He said, "How much post-production work do you kind of put into doing that vivid work, kind of making those colours pop, I guess?"
Post-production, not a lot actually. I don't do as I guess it depends. I think that always depends on, that's always a case by case basis. Like it really depends on the story, and like it really depends on the context you were in as you were taking the photo. So there have been times, for instance, if I'm shooting in a studio, I might need less post-production than if I'm shooting outside, right? Because outside you have there are more factors that come into play that you're not able to control. Like you don't control the environment 100%, you don't control the lighting 100%. And so you might need a little more refinement in post-production. Whereas when it's in studio, you have a little more initial control on the light and like the composition and what your camera is actually going to capture. And so I found that when I'm shooting indoors anyways, I don't need as much post-production as I might if it's an outdoor shoot, for instance.
Next question for you is from Angela, asking, how do you come up with the stories that you tell and then execute them? We kind of touched on that a little bit, I think, before as well.
Yeah, it's a combination of ideas either I might have or the people I'm working with. So like either the model or the makeup artists or the stylists. And so, but a lot of it comes from me. For instance, Boy Wives and Female Husbands that you see on the right is a story about exploring queer identity in pre-colonial Africa. And so the different chapters are kind of showing different either public figures or like people from different communities that have existed in which queerness and transness and being not belonging to either femininity or masculinity was part of the norm, and they had their own place in society and without any discrimination or without any violence. And so that's a book from the same name that I stumbled upon when I was, I think, my last year in undergraduate. And I've always thought that it would be because that's something even a lot of us from Africa are not aware of, that there had been that queer people existed, right? And like I think the idea was exposed to growing up anyways was that queerness was a thing that was introduced to by colonialism and by Europeans into Africa, whereas it's actually the opposite. Like discrimination against queer people is what the Europeans introduced into Africa through religion, through Christianity, etc. And so that book is I read the book and then it inspired me to kind of create visual stories based on kind of the people and the communities that were in the book. So this one is about Queen Zinga, which was a queen in Angola who fought for years against European invasion. And her specificity, I'd say, is that she had boy wives. And so she had like an harem of men who were dressing like women. And so and they were called their boy wives. And yeah, that was just the thing, and that was just, the norm. And it was not like strange and it was not special. It was just, a thing that was happening. And so yeah, these are kind of like the stories I was exploring in this series.
And I would definitely highly recommend just obviously having a look at Yannis's website, because some of the stories are amazing. Just kind of you give it like a bit of a brief bio as well to each one, which is really interesting to read before you actually start kind of really looking.
Yeah.
So I definitely say jump on the website and have a look and have a read. It's really interesting. We've got another question for you from Matt Walker. He would like to know a little bit about who inspires you.
Yes. Like I was saying earlier, I'm really inspired by artists who are purposely limiting themselves into doing something specific and kind of not going outside of that. So one of my favorite artists is a Liberian painter called Lina Iris Victor. And she's from London too, actually. And she's this painter / photographer who explores issues of femininity and like kind of like also through like African aesthetics. And but her specificity is that she only works with like 3 colors, but within that limitation she's able to do so much that I think is very inspiring to see an artist kind of able to express themselves with such range through such a limited capacity, I'd say.
Have you
And
got sorry.
And then I have also like I really love a lot of fashion photographers like Merton Marcus, and a lot of like I said, like African photographers like Malik Sidibé. So I have different but all of them, I'd say like the specificity to all of them is that they have a very specific visual language that you're able to recognize kind of right away. And I think that's what I like a lot or the most, and what inspires me the most in an artist.
This one's quite an interesting one that we've also had through. It's kind of, how did you find working with sort of different communities that you were obviously working with in your images, and sort of hearing their stories and then trying to actually then communicate that? How do you find that process?
I think it's one of the best, one of the most interesting process about photography, right? Because like it's the exchange, and like so even before, like whether it's with the makeup artist or the stylist or the model too, because they're the ones through which the story is going to get told. So also, so their perspective and their own experiences also comes into play, and also impacts and influences the image. And so yeah, I think exchange has been, even beyond photography, I found it beneficial for me just as for my own growth, right? Because and it also made me realize how different, regardless of like the similarities that we might have, how different people's experiences can be, even if we come from, the same region or the same place. And yeah, I'd say that's what that's the most beneficial thing, that it allowed me to see um, difference of perspective, which I would not have been able to see otherwise, I think.
So just through that kind of, again, that collaborative process, it's kind of
Yeah.
showing you a different side as well. So you're learning as much as
Yeah,
the people you're
exactly.
working with are as well.
Yeah.
And we've got a question from Gary as well. He sort of said, this is about more your location work specifically. What kind of approaches you're taking to kind of the lighting? I'm guessing that's probably, do you take a lot of studio kit out with you, or are you kind of using what's kind of available?
When it's outdoors, I'm using what's available. I've never really used I mean, I might have like a reflector or something probably, but I don't think I've ever taken photos with like an outdoor, like a light. I probably should start. But
I mean, that just makes the work you're doing even more impressive, because the control of the lighting that you've got is incredible. If you're literally just using what's there, that's
yeah, and thank you. And yeah, and because I live in Canada, so it's a lot of also like trick. But the good thing about Canada is that the despite the winter, even in the winter time, the sun, you still have really good light. Like you can still have like a really like a full day of like blue sky and like very sunny. I mean, it's gonna be cold, but it's gonna be sunny. So like outdoors honestly is not very, like I feel like here um I've been pretty lucky with like lighting in terms of photography, because it's pretty even, it's pretty clear, and it's like throughout the year um it's pretty sunny also. I mean, not obviously in the winter it's not going to be sunny every day, but there are going to be days when it's going to be very sunny, even though it's like minus 24 or something.
good. So, Robin, and I think we're on week 3 of grey clouds in England. So, I mean, yeah, you can see your control of lighting just like looking at the series Summer Somewhere. I mean, again, I can't believe you're not using anything. That's wild. So good.
Yeah, that was just like completely just natural light and the sun.
It's pretty good. Cool. I think that's all the questions, unless there's any parting thoughts you'd like to kind of share, or any kind of a little bit about the kind of, obviously I think you're working on a project at the moment that I saw from your Instagram as well, I believe.
Yeah, I'm working on, well, I have a couple of projects that are not out yet necessarily that I'm eager to share very soon. And but other than that, I'm currently working on planning kind of the next phase of like the kind of like the next few stories that I'm going to be creating, and it's been a really good time too, because I haven't taken photos, like I said earlier, since like January. So like the break was a good time to like actually reflect on what I want my work to look like, and kind of what, and also where I want my work to be too. Like kind of how I want it to be presented, and how I want it to be received. And yeah, I'm very excited to get back into like creating, and hopefully be able to share all of it very soon.
So you basically give you a follow on Instagram. You can see some of
Yeah,
the work.
yeah. So if you follow me at Yannis Davy, YANNISDAVY, you'll be able to. That's the place where I update my work the most frequently. So that's where you'll be able to see like my latest stories and all of that.
So one final parting question for you. What would you tell your younger self?
What would I tell my younger self? To stay consistent, and to stop being scared, because there's nothing to be scared of.
Nice.
Like even, but because I think even like as artists in general, we're like we tend to have like um and that's something I still struggle with a little bit, like tend to think that tend to devalue ourselves, I guess, and to think like we tend to be scared of like to even reach out to people, or to even share work, or to even like just put yourself out there. But there's no reason to be scared, you know. So yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been really interesting. As I said, definitely have a look at Yannis's website, have a look at the Instagram, check out his work, and have a read of the stories. It's really interesting work. And again, thank you for being here and speaking to us all the way from Canada. It's cool.
Thank you so much for having me.
And
Thank you.
obviously, keep an eye on the YouTube channel. We've got still, I think, 3 more days of events coming up. So don't forget to join us tomorrow for our safe and positive protest photography. We look forward to seeing you then, and have a nice evening.
Bye.
Thanks.